practically invisible. Cheap ass Walmart brand. Don't die on me. I reach for it and look up. And find him looking in my direction. I tell you, I saw no face. It was white, gray, whatever, like a doll. Was it a mask? I don't know, but I was terrified that I was discovered, pinpointed out from my cover. It was far from me, but it still managed to see me in like 4 seconds. So I stare slack-jaw, slowly lifting up my camera. In that moment he or it lifts one white arm out of its tarp and points at him. Just pointing at me from a distance, as if doing some ritual jest, then his arm drops slowly down. You know that scene from Shaun of the Dead where Shaun pushes the zombie chick onto the steel pole and she gets up, while Ed rotates the film reel on his camera? That's what I did. I lifted my camera up. Snap, another one. Snap. Battery officially dead. Then I got up, slowly backed away and ran all the way back to the safe zone, and out a dozen trails and paths, crisscrossing to my exit. That was a crazy ass day, I must say. 2 revealment pics coming up. Alright, I'll bite. Be 9 years old. Hanging out at old friend's house in Princeton, New Jersey. Home was near an old mental asylum village, sort of like a small time for crazy people. Village closed down long ago. Go in woods behind his house, which is kind of near the old spot. Start going out really far. See man crouched behind log 50 yards away wearing a tall hat staring at us. Nope, the frick out. Go back to the closer area, his house is only 25 yards away. See a cloaked gray human figure dancing strangely between a few trees. Nope, round 2. Get to porch in his backyard overlooking the woods. See a new figure, all white, walking across a path 100 yards away in the woods. Never leave his house for the rest of the weekend. I will never, ever forget that day. The dancing figure haunts me to this day. B12. Get sent to a correctional summer camp by mistake because best friend's mom is ESL. 1,200 kids. I'm one of 5 white kids. Friend and I get assigned to Cherokee Camp. Cherokee Camp is pretty in a woods, and my cabin is even further in a woods, about 2-5 m from a large creek. Cabins are your basic 15x156 foot wall with 4 feet of openness into the roof. Bunk beds. Bottom bunk is mashed up against the wall, top bunk is exactly parallel with the open window. Get a top bunk assigned. Camp generally pretty cool. I was/am a bit weird, so the blacks thought I was a voodoo doctor. Late one night laying in bunk. New moon. Night is blacker than the camp. Hear what I thought was raccoons fighting by creek. The fight manages to make its way right under my window. Screams and snarls rattle my existence. One creature slams into the side of the cabin and runs off howling. Hear growling and labored breathing. Then hear claws scratching and pulling through the window. Hide in sleeping bag. Creature climbs into bunk and sits on my legs. Can't breathe, I'm so terrified. Entire camp is dead quiet. Creature is impossibly heavy, couldn't move if I wanted to. It sits and licks itself for what feels like forever. Suddenly hear a truck tear into camp. Bright spotlights blaze into my cabin. Creature lets out some horrible scream like something I've never heard before. It bolts out the window, so hard and fast it rips my sleeping bag and scratches my left shin. Piss myself. Truck tears off into the woods after it. Next morning find hollowed out raccoon by the creek. All other campers visibly frightened the next morning. They all thought I was dead. We all asked counselors WTF happened. Never get a straight answer. 32 now still have a scar on my shin from whatever scratched me. This was way in Northern California. Hey, race the scar. It's hard to see now as it's 20 years old. It was the chief counselor's truck. He had some crazy stories about that camp. He had worked there for over 30 years. It had roof lights and 2 huge spotlight cannons for when kids would try to escape. Hey, race 1, which included people that I found. After walking along a beach in Olympia, I headed into the woods to explore. About 3:30 p.m., I found this very odd camp with 2 people. I think they were a couple. The guy looked like he was about 50, the girl was like 30 probably. They looked like castaways because their clothes were just totally messed up and they were all dirty. I said what's up and they started talking to me, mostly ranting on these strange tangents about the forest. Anyway, their camp was basically blankets all over and cans and blankets stretched across trees for cover. Obviously it rains a lot. They had liberty caps, magic shrooms, laid out drying on one side of the camp. There was probably like 2 pounds. One thing that was really weird was these like handmade clay urns laying in a row on a blanket. There was like 15 or so. And when I asked, the guy got really pissed and started telling me that if I start messing with people's stuff I should expect trouble. And the girl like curled into a ball for a bit. Way goddamn weird. I said sorry and whatever, and then the girl asked me if I wanted some beer. I was pretty interested, so I decided to stay. While we were drinking though, they didn't talk or respond to any questions. Then I looked at the urns and the guy just yelled really loud at me and then took the girl to the side and whispered to her. Anyway, they came back and started drinking again, probably about 6:30 p.m. by now, but now they kept glancing at me with really pissed off looks every so often and still ignored me. I was getting pretty freaked out, plus it was getting hella late, so I was like, yo, so I'm leaving. I acted a bit more aggressive because I was freaked. And I also had my hand on my knife in my pocket. They still just freaking stared at me. So I left kind of normally, but once I got further away I booked it. So that was pretty tripped out, but when I thought I was seriously going to die is when I got back by the camp area, and the ranger post. It was pretty far, like an hour walk, and it was fairly dark and no one was there. As I'm passing the post, all of a sudden I hear this guy goddamn yell again all freaking crazy, and I look over and he's just standing over at the edge of the woods, breathing all hard and staring at me. I flipped and started yelling, and I pulled out my knife, telling him to fuck off. Then he yelled at me, "You are such a stupid fuck. You fuck. You fuck." And then he pulled out a freaking gun from his pocket. It was like a tiny revolver or some crap. At that point I just flipped crap, telling him to calm down and shit, and then he just laughed, mostly just snorted, and put it away and left. Scariest goddamn thing ever. I felt like crying the whole way home. Anyway, sorry this story's all over the place and ended with kind of nothing, but it was seriously so messed up. Most of them, chief counselor stories, were your basic scare the kids camp stories. But he told this one that made his face pale, so I think there was some legitimacy to it. So the camp had a corral for the horses that was right by the main road. It was the first structure after a bridge that lead off into the woods, a 30-minute drive to the highway. I'm sorry I don't remember all the details, this was a long time ago. But 2 kids tried to escape one night. The guards were on them in about 10 minutes. They were spotted running across the bridge. They got to the far side, which was sort of cliff-like, fairly steep into about a 20-foot drop. One guard was on the opposite bank with a spotlight on them and the other was running across the bridge. One kid froze on the bridge after the guard shouted to him, while the other kept running. He had just gotten to the other side when something darted across the bridge, knocking over the guard and the now captured kid. The guard with the light ran over to them. No one knew what the hell was happening, they just reported a larger than human figure pushing them over. The kid who fled was found on the shore of the creek unconscious with no memory of even trying to escape or trying to escape with his friend. I have another story in continuation to this. So later that summer animals start to go missing. The camp had about 12 horses and a petting zoo with pigs and goats, stuff like that. At first a few chickens would go missing here and there. Then a goat, then 2 pigs. This was over a 3-week period. The head counselor set up a blind to try and catch what was doing this. So one night he's in his blind by the petting zoo. In this part of the camp it's shapes like an L. The bottom right is the zoo/blind. The 90 degree is the corral, which is 20 m from the zoo. And the vertical is the road and bridge into the woods and out of camp. So at about 2 a.m. he starts hearing sniffing and grunting almost like wild pigs between the zoo and corral. Not wanting to blow his cover, the chief doesn't shine his light, hoping the creature will come closer. It doesn't. It goes to the corral and attacks a horse. The chief, whatever this thing was, had killed their newest horse, dragged it 60 meters across the bridge, removing its head and vanishing into the woods. He caught a few glimpses of the thing and said it had to be around 8 feet tall and mannish-shaped. The horse's head was found at the property's owner's house in the front yard 5 miles away the next morning. Told you I would. Something else happened while I was there with my friend. I had completely forgotten. I called him earlier today to catch up and see if he remembered anything else. So the swimming pool was actually a dammed part in the creek. It had a rocky beach on one side and a steep hill with a 15-foot rocky outcropping, diving board, on the other. On average the water was probably 5 feet deep and maybe 7 to 8 underneath the outcropping. So on the hottest day of camp the swimming hole was packed, maybe 20 kids. Doesn't sound like a lot, but the swimming area was relatively small, 12 feet across by maybe 30 in length. Almost everyone is lining up to jump off the rock. And my buddy is just sitting in the shallow water playing with rocks and river clay. So the lunch siren blows, and everyone lines up to be counted. You had to be counted in and out for each activity area. Well, the count comes up 1 short. They count again, still short. The lifeguards question everyone there. A few kids that were on the beach said the missing girl jumped right at the siren. Both lifeguards jump in and dive search for the girl. The water was pretty murky and muddy. It had no visibility. They do this for so long, my friend and that group miss lunch entirely. More counselors show up. 8 people are in this small pool searching for this girl. Still nothing. The search continues for another 5 hours. At this point no one but staff is allowed at the swimming hole. So the next day they bring in a backhoe, bulldozer combination, and a water pump. Because it's a creek they can only drain so much, but they still manage to get the deep water down to about 4 feet. So they finally find the girl about 26 hours after she had gone missing. She was at the bottom of the deep part, and I think it's important to mention that there were no logs or ledges under the water that might snag up a body. I found out later by accidental eavesdropping that the girl was completely covered in rocks. The only way they found her was someone stepped down on some rocks that